Today's Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, from 5:30. We're at the Auburn Town Hall. This is the Town of Auburn Finance Committee. Let me read the remote participation script. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely, telephone in at 1-786-535-3211 with an access code of 991-599-357, or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/991-599-357. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. Permit me to confirm that all members are in persons anticipated on the agenda participating remotely are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. We don't have Trevor this evening. Michael Marshall.
Present.
Patrick Jones.
Here.
Stephen Consiglio.
Here.
George Graham.
Here.
And we have Town Manager, Administrator, Mr. Kaznovich.
Here. Thank you.
Sharon Kwiatkowski.
Here.
Okay, hopefully that will be the last time for that, as that's on the agenda for later this evening. So tonight's agenda, that was our call to order. We're going to have our budget kickoff. We'll do some transfers. Presentation from the fire chief relative to a comparison on overtime. A reorganization, a little bit delayed reorganization of the finance committee. Review some transfers, and as I just mentioned, a discussion and potential vote to discontinue the remote hybrid meeting participation option. With that, no questions, we'll move right into our budget kickoff. Thank you first for all the department heads that are with us this evening, took time to be with us, so.
I guess I'm at bat. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
What's that?
I guess I'm up at the plate, correct?
You are it, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, I am planning on presenting the first cut of the FY26 budget. I can give you the 2-hour version, or I can give you the 15-minute abbreviated version, whichever you'd like to see. So let me guess, you want the 15-minute, correct?
Very detailed, thorough 15-minute version, probably.
Yeah. You can ask any questions once I present, so. Let me power up. So members of the Finance Committee and Department and Division Heads, thank you for coming out tonight for this presentation, and members of the general public. Tonight we are presenting our estimates for the FY26 budget. In summary, we are estimating, and we know this is going to change, but this is based upon trend analysis and a wage index that has been computed for both town and school. We're estimating appropriations of roughly $84,757,000 and change, made up by an offset of revenues, local receipts of $12,730,000, cherry sheet estimates of $18,443,000, a tax levy estimate of $49,825,000, total debt exclusion for the middle school, $1,429,000, and other available funds of $2,319,000, giving us a projected shortfall of roughly $10,745. When we look at the current fiscal year, as it compares to our estimates for FY26, at this point, we're level funding our local receipts as just approved for the current fiscal year, FY25, on the recently approved tax recap sheet. Too early to determine the level of receipts that we may expect. We'll know more about whether or not there's any growth as we approach the spring and later on in the fiscal year. Cherry sheet revenue, we're estimating, and I really want to highlight this cherry sheet revenue. We're estimating growth of about 1.63%. I saw estimates as recently as today that are estimating some growth in state aid currently being monitored, but I can tell you that the state revenue budget to actual for the current fiscal year is down about $150 million. They're expecting some additional growth in the luxury tax. That's coming in way above and beyond what was estimated, almost double. But you got to remember, some of the state revenue is still being used to fund the homeless people that we have in Auburn and throughout the state at a cost of about $1 billion. So I know there's a recently approved plan by the governor that will transition those individuals out of the local hotels into permanent housing and to rental housing. What that means for us is unknown. I can tell you that there's a supplemental budget currently before the legislature to address funding beyond 12/31 of this year that will continue hopefully to provide $104 per day per student for the individuals that are enrolled in our school system. Tax levy, this estimate provides the utilization of all of 2.5 and an estimated new growth of about $800,000. Our debt exclusion is going to go down roughly by 1% or $27,000. As we get deeper into our debt and interest schedule, those payments go down. In available funds, a reduction of $2,180,000, primarily if we look at the level of free cash, retained earnings, and other available funds that we typically vote at the fall town meeting. That's what that big number consists of. When we look at our revenue in terms of tax levy, once again, $49.8 million. It uses 100% of 2.5 in this model. It utilizes $800,000 in new growth, and I can tell you we've been averaging about 740 over the last 5 years, but we're expecting a bump in new growth as a result of the development on the west side of town, Eastland Partners, which is going to be a phased-in approach over the next year, and is going to result in some additional new growth that we currently don't have. Based on this projection, our excess levy would remain equal to what we have in FY25, $9.3 million. That's a levy utilization of about 84.25%. The excess levy represents about 15.75% unused. And once again, it raises $1.428 million outside of the levy limit, debt exclusion vote for the purposes of the middle school until that is paid off. Here's a capture of our new growth over the last 5 years. As you can see, in FY25, we had 822,000. We're expecting something similar in FY26, but the 5-year average is 740,000. Here's a breakdown of the tax levy. 2.5% increase, 1,422,000. Added new growth of 800. So that gives us about $2.2 million to apply towards our operating budget. We'd have a levy of $49,825,000. Once again, that's 84% of our total levy limit. Here's our excess levy history. As you can see, over the past roughly 13 years, up until really the current fiscal year that we're in, we weren't even coming close to Prop 2.5. We were taxing at 2.42 out of a 2.50 in the year that we're in. And once again, for FY26, we are estimating utilization of 2.50%. We know that's going to change and fluctuate based upon a number of factors. It always does. Our cherry sheet revenue, we're estimating $18,442,000. That's a projected 1.63% increase over the current fiscal year. Our 5-year average on that growth is about 3.86. Unknown Chapter 70 distribution, and as I said earlier, there's some scuttlebutt that there could be some 9C cuts coming for the current fiscal year. I hope that is not the case because that would not bode well for the FY26 projections. And once again, the homeless state reimbursement of 104 per day is unknown. We should be learning more about that in the next 30 days or so. When we look at our cherry sheet growth over the last 10 years, we've been averaging on an annual basis growth of about close to $950,000. As you can see in FY25, we weren't even close to that. We got about $337,000. I'm hoping that we can get back to that 10-year average, because that would mean less of reliance on local revenues to support our annual operating budget. When we look at our available funds, there's a reduction of roughly $2.2 million. We're estimating right now for FY26, based upon CIP requests and based upon obligations that are reoccurring on an annual basis, roughly $2.3 million. We're going to recognize right now a reduction of $40,000 over the current year because we used overlay surplus to fund a portion of our FY25. A $903,000 appropriation to the fall town meeting of free cash. This consideration will be made, as always, at the fall town meeting once our free cash is certified. $411,000 reduction in premium bond receipts. We use that in FY24 as a one-time capital expense. And a reduction in sewer retained earnings of $329,000 in change over what was appropriated in FY25. We also have a reduction in package hog retained earnings. We brought at the fall town meeting 2 warrant articles for $180,000. That is not part of the estimate for FY26. Reduction in cable access retained earning funds of $40,000 because there is no capital items scheduled in FY26. Reduction of bond premiums of $73,500 is a one-time capital expense of $25,000. In stabilization funds, we used a $200,000 offset, I believe for a piece of fire equipment for an engine as a one-time use. And we may be considering utilization of stabilization for a school math program that we programmed into the capital expense. But that has not been built into the budget yet. We're still working on the capital side. Here is a listing of our FY26 available funds. And I'm guessing you all received a packet, so you can follow along in your packet. And for the department heads that are here, there are additional handouts here if you'd like to follow along. Local receipts, as I stated earlier, we estimated level funding from FY25 of $12,730,000. Here's a listing of our local receipts. We could look at our total revenue for FY26. We're projecting $84,746,670. That's up 0.37% over the current fiscal year of 25, an increase of $288,270.98. And you say, how can that be? Remember, FY25 fully loaded includes all those retained earnings, all those appropriations for free cash. So we're doing a comparison to end of the fall town meeting. If we would do a comparison to what was voted at the annual town meeting, this percentage rate would be a lot higher. On the expense side, the projections is calculated on the final FY25 fall town meeting. It indexes all our wage-related accounts by roughly $1.335 million, which absorbs approximately close to 94% of our total available 2.5. For those who are in attendance tonight, please calculate your payroll using 52.2 weeks. It estimates our solid waste pickup, which is our contractual increase, which we know is in place at a rate of 6%. That also includes our recycling costs. Based upon trend analysis, we're estimating an increase in employee benefits at a blended 7%. That's all of our employee benefits. This budget provides for all of our debt and interest payments that are currently known. It adds $130,000 to our 5-year CIP, tax levy funding offset, in accordance with our financial policies. And that would account for a CIP tax levy utilization of approximately $1.7 million. There is no tax levy OPEB funding at this time. Once again, we may consider the utilization of free cash at the fall town meeting. It level funds our snow and ice levels at current year, FY25 appropriations. And it level funds our adjusted school Medicaid receipts amended at the fall town meeting at $160,000. Continuing on, it level funds our cherry sheet assessments and charges and offsets at 25 level. This budget includes and follows our guidelines of our financial policies. This would be year 13 since its adoption. There is no earmark for stabilization at this time. It increases our Bay Path assessment by about 5%. I know that's a little high, but we've been seeing increased enrollment at Bay Path over the last several years and expecting that trend to continue. Hopefully, we'll get some good news if those numbers stabilize. But last year, I think there was an increase of 11, which really increased our assessment because of that increase. And it increased our Norfolk Aggie assessment based upon enrollment as of October 1. That also includes transportation. I'm not going to go through this. This is an appropriation by department, leading to total direct appropriations of $79,746,836. When we add in the abatements, cherry sheet charges, offsets, capital expense, we're coming up with an appropriation of roughly $83 million. Then we add in our school Medicare, our health trust level funded. There's our wage index of 1.335, and McKinney-Vento, giving us total overall appropriations of $84,757,416 and change. When we look at the expense side, at roughly $84.757 million, that's up 0.38% over current fiscal year. That's an increase of $299,016.96. Once again, that leads to a projected deficit of $10,746,746. To recap, appropriations over estimated income, it's roughly the same. Once again, leading to a deficit of $10,745,097. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I just want to highlight the fact that we know this number is going to change, and it always does, and we're going to keep you informed as we move along, as things change, because it's going to have an impact on our departments. It's going to have an impact on our operating budgets. And we're eagerly awaiting the state numbers, because that's going to be a telling story as to what that's going to do for our local budget. We're expecting that to come out on or about January 22nd or 23rd. Those numbers typically are released at the MMA annual conference. The governor will release those numbers. Hopefully, we'll get some indication earlier than that, but typically, if that's the case, it's days before and not weeks. So we'll keep you plugged in on that. And I also want to underscore the importance of submitting this on a timely basis if you can. We want to begin the process on a timely basis. My days are numbered. I will not be delivering a final budget to you because I'm going to run out of time. So we'll make sure that it remains in good hands. Dory has been appointed the interim at a time when they will be seeking a permanent replacement for my position. I'm confident that Dory will be a candidate for the position, but I couldn't tell you what the final outcome is going to be. Based upon a timeline, I'm guessing that appointment will probably be made sometime in May-ish. We did send out an RFP for a professional recruitment firm. Those bids are due in on January 10th, at which time we'll go back to the board, who will interview those firms and select, and they will begin the process of advertising for the position and screening all candidates for the position of town manager. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you should have any.
Questions relative to the presentation?
Okay. Good.
My only comment was I was a bit surprised that you seemed as optimistic about the state numbers. Is a sense of confidence only working for a state agency? We've been told significant cuts are coming our way, and to hear that you're not as concerned or believe it may not be as bad sort of caught me a little bit by surprise.
So I think there is going to be a cry throughout the state, especially from local government, that it's going to be difficult to make things work out, given the limited growth in revenue, not only at the local level, but at the state level. I am somewhat optimistic. I'm hoping that as a result of the governor's position on the homeless sheltering situation, that may free up some dollars that will work back to the local government. But that remains to be seen. So, and if that is the case, then there may be a willingness for the state legislature to consider using some rainy day funds, knowing that it could be supplanted with the redirect of the migrant money at some point in time. So many moving pieces here. We're equally as concerned about what may come down from the state. We've had those hard discussions. We're prepared for that. But until such time, it's like throwing a dot at a dartboard in the dark. So we're keeping our ear close to the ground and trying to find out as much as we can that will help push this process along.
Thank you. Any additional questions relative to the kickoff? So this will be our last kickoff with you. That is
I believe this is my 30th kickoff.
30th kickoff with you.
So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. So just for myself, thank you for my years and all your support and what you've presented to us and made the budget process informational and the fiscal responsibility. It's been eye-opening. This experience has been a great experience for me, and I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. We wouldn't be where we are today if not for the support of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, because we presented to you a plan, a model that we followed that really put us in good financial standing. And in difficult times, you rely on those reserves, you rely on that financial flexibility. At least it's available if the Finance Committee or the Board of Selectmen should consider that as an option. And in difficult times, you may want to consider that just to keep things glued together. But it has to be done in such a way that it can be sustained. Because if it can't be sustained, then you're going to erode those reserves over a period of time, and you're going to take a major step backwards. So I want to thank you for supporting us and allowing us to do what we need to do, and as well as the department heads, because they made some sacrifices over the years too that allowed this to move forward and to happen. So thank you to all.
Certainly want to allow my fellow committee members, if they have anything they want to offer, and the time, so.
I would be remiss if I didn't say something. I worked with Ed on the Finance Committee many, many, many years ago when you were just the town accountant. And I don't mean just the town accountant because it takes a lot to be a town accountant. But in today's world, people come and go from jobs every 4 years, every 5 years, every 15 years, every 10 years. People sit back and their resumes don't constitute their ability by means of staying in something. There is something to be said for longevity. You've worked through some really tough hardships in this town. You've worked through some battles and you've worked through some wars. When I watched you give your resignation at the selectmen's meeting, I heard you acknowledge so much praise to the town, and I watched you speak of how grateful you were for the town of Auburn giving you the privilege to do your job. I think the residents of Auburn and the people that have come through as managers and committee members have been very privileged to have someone like yourself with your constitution, your strength, your ability to communicate, your ability to delegate, and your ability to grow in your job. You started off as an accountant, and I said just an accountant, but you're leaving Auburn as someone who's just made such an incredible contribution to us as citizens and to our community. And I know I, for one, am very grateful that I've had a privilege to have worked for so long alongside you and for all that you've done for our community. You're more than a step above the rest. I need to take a minute and just recognize so much that you've done that so many people leave on the table because you stayed in Auburn and you gave 30 years of your career. And for that, we get what we get. We get you leaving in a AA+ community, a group of boards and committees that can work together and not against each other. Years ago, the world was so different when we were a finance committee. It was so different to sit here and the citizens to need, and the town employees to need, and the schools to need, and the fire department to need. And one of the reasons why all of that came is because we had individuals like yourself who stuck with the program, and because you stuck with the program, you enabled that thread to continue to go through because we had someone that tapped into the knowledge and you had the skill set and the ability. So you chose to grow in Auburn. And we're blessed that you did that. So thank you for all of your years of service.
Thank you, Patrick. That means a lot to me. Have any tissues?
I can't say it any better than that, so I'll just say thank you and congrats.
Thanks, Mike.
Happy for you.
I would say ditto to what Patrick said too. And I mean, I know I wouldn't be here. I was just applying for the zoning bylaw review committee, and you mentioned there was an opening here, and so it all worked out. So I appreciate that and
I
everything.
recognized a talented individual at the time, and I thought you would serve well on the finance committee, so.
Appreciate that as well. But yeah, it's been great. Learned a lot. Just obviously, you know your stuff after all this time, and I don't know you as well as these guys, but can tell you've done a great job and a great guy overall. So
Thanks,
thank you.
George.
You are a master number cruncher, which I've called you that before. I mean, it's just the stuff that rolls off your tongue is pretty unbelievable. You really know it inside and out. And to be honest, I had questions about way back when whether an accountant should become the town manager, but you've certainly proved me wrong because you know where everything is. So it was actually a perfect training ground for what you've been, I'm sure you have stories about what it was like being number two when you wanted to be number one, but you've had a great tenure.
Well, thank you. Just to pick up on a comment Patrick made, it wasn't easy back in the day. Remember the old finance committee meetings? We'd be here till midnight and picking things apart and making some real difficult decisions that were not popular decisions, but they needed to be made in the best interest of our community. And we struggled through that, and we had some contentious town meetings as a result of some difficult decisions that the Finance Committee made that didn't always sit well with various departments within town government. But I think everyone recognized that we did what we could within the parameters that we could, because we didn't have the financial flexibility back then. And that's when we decided to put a plan in motion, and I think it's paid dividends. Our reserves have never been better, and it's good to know that it's there on a rainy day or when we fall upon difficult times like we're facing now with limited growth. It's an option that you can always exercise. So it's better to have that option than not to have that option at all. So thank you for your comments, Steve. I appreciate it.
Anything else on this one before?
And I'll be watching from afar, keeping an eye on things, so.
Well,
Don't
thank you.
forget the kids and the family. That's why you're doing this.
Okay, so we'll move on to our transfer requests for this evening. Staff from Sharon was kind enough to put them in a nice order for us here. The first one is from the library, coming from the Assistant Director account. Amount requested $7,881. Going to the Assistant to the Director Technology account, thank you. And it's the reason given retro mid-year salary increase.
If I may, just so I can, I guess, explain this. So we lost the library director, and we have some talented individuals at the library. At the time before the library director left, there was some suggestions for some consideration for these two individuals, and I explained to the library director that I will consider this once we adequately staff the library, because we had open positions, and I was using that as a tool to do a review of the entire staff at the library. These individuals have really stepped up to the plate. They deserve this. We made an offer. We interviewed for the library director's position. We made an offer, and it's pending a number of background checks. But we're excited to get someone on board, and that's just step one of many steps. So we're gonna, once that individual is on board, we're gonna rely on the individual to help us go out and hire an assistant library director, and we're going right down the line. These two individuals deserve this reclassification. For all practical purposes, they're running the library now. They play an integral part in running day-to-day operations at the library and will going forward.
I know she's not here because I know she's at a library board of
Yes.
trustees meeting as we speak, but I just want to say, I think Dory's done a great job
Thank you.
filling that void in the last few months. It's
So
been,
Dory stepped in. She's kept things glued together with the assistance of these two individuals. These two individuals have been outstanding. Morale is like we've never seen down there before. Things are really looking up, and we're excited about that.
Based on these adjustments, when the library budget comes in, will we see an increase in the overall salaries? Is this sort of reallocating the current,
No, so there's money available in the budget because positions have not been filled. Yes, it will require that we reflect their adjusted pay in the '26 budget. In addition to that, we asked the library director to do a assessment of the workforce down there now. Is it the model that they would like to see, or would they consider something different than what's in place now? So this is going to be a moving thing. We don't expect it to really cost any more money than is currently allocated now. But is the model that's in place now, does that best fit the need of our community? So.
Any questions on this?
Well, I didn't until you asked your question. Are you saying that there's two individuals that are getting assistant, they're just being given this as assistant directors, or because there is no director in place? Or is there only one assistant director?
No, they are already assistant directors.
They're already,
Yeah,
so they're
those-
in two different sections of
Yes.
the library?
Yes.
Operations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Any other questions? We have a motion if not?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next one, also from the Assistant Director account, going to, amount requested, $7,881, same amount, going to the Assistant Director, this one's of Administration, I imagine, they're both abbreviated. Reason given, retro mid-year salary increase.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, this one is from the Board of Health, from the Health Clerical account, amount requested $1,180, going to the SW Coordinator Staff Assistant. Reason given, cover salary deficit and budget account. Any questions on this one? We have Ms. Coyle here if you do.
I guess I would just ask if the deficit is related to a raise or just what's the cause of the deficit?
Good evening. Thank you for the question. This is a transfer request because of the coordinator position. It was just a clerical error. It's actually a step increase, but it was budgeted at a lower step.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
This one from Auburn Community Television, coming from the contingency account, amount requested $1,334, going to the salary account, reason given 1% wage adjustment resulting from successful evaluation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
From the Golf Enterprise account, from contingency, actually, do we have any motions to?
I move that we take the following, I believe it's 7 transfers, all of which are coming from the contingency account as one.
Second.
Two different departments.
Two different departments.
Oh, I
Yeah.
move that we take the following 4,
Four.
all coming from contingency as one.
Okay.
We have a motion to take the 4 golf,
Seconded.
golf and from contingency. We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'll just read them. Coming from contingency, amount requested $14, going to director. And these are all the same reason, the 1% wage adjustment resulting from successful evaluation. Next one from contingency, $521, going to the superintendent, I believe that the abbreviation given. Next one, contingency, $343, going to the groundskeeper account. And the last one, also contingency, $12, going to the club manager account for the same reason given.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next one has 3.
I move that we take the following 3 transfers, all coming from contingency account as one.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
This is the DPW Sewer Division. They're again all coming from contingency. The first one, amount requested $14, going to the director account, and these all have the same reason, 1% wage adjustment resulting from successful evaluation. Second one, contingency, $23, going to the operations manager. And the last one, contingency, $587, going to the salary superintendent for the reason given.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, this is a request for transfer from the reserve account, salary reserve, from Veteran Services. Salary, amount requested $2,908. Reason for the shortened account, to cover salary of new hire through fiscal year end. Anything on that one you want to?
So, former VSO, individual, left, moved on to another community. So we had a hire, and we advertised the rate of pay, and we negotiated something a little higher than what her predecessor was getting. That's what the market dictated, so that's why there's an adjustment here.
Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
This is also from the reserve account, from Town Hall. from the town hall building maintenance. Amount requested $15,000. Okay, sorry, down the bottom. Reason given, emergency repairs to electric outlets, HVAC system, boiler. Looks like a few things.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a number of unfortunate situations, so our electrical panel box had to be updated and worked on. Our sprinkler system, we had a couple of breaks. We had an aging system, so they have to cut out sections of pipe because the system is leaking air, and we run the risk of those pipes being filled up with water, and then the sprinklers are gonna go off. So we know when our compressor goes on downstairs, constantly running, that we have a leak. It's unfortunate, but we have to make those repairs. And at times, it's costly because the one that was leaking was up on the upper floor within the attic space, and they had to cut out a space. And so unfortunately, we're faced with situations like that. We do have an aging system, something that we should probably look at updating in its totality. Maybe that's a good use of free cash. We'll have to price that out in conjunction with the fire department. But that is a constant situation that we're dealing with.
I can recall a number of these over the years, different emergency repairs too.
So in some cases, they just put a patch on it, just as a short term, and then they have to come back and cut out the pipe and put in, yeah.
Questions on this one?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Last one from Legal Services, coming from the General Counsel account. Amount requested $30,000, going to the negotiator account. Reason given, additional labor counsel services. Town Manager, any-
Without getting specific, I can tell you it's been a litigious year. A number of lawsuits, and a number of grievances that we have to deal with. So just kind of a stretch of bad luck, but yeah, that's kind of draining the negotiator account.
Based on that, do you see any increases, again, without tipping your hand as to what the budget's going to look like when you roll it out, in those services? Because I think this is a municipal and state government, or probably even general government, that it is a more litigious society, and workers seem to go to that avenue pretty quickly nowadays. Do we see those accounts maybe being increased, or are you going to sort of stay in the same?
No, I think we can stay in the same pattern that we've had, although we are now starting negotiations. So as we get deeper into negotiations, that may result in the utilization of town council, especially if these matters tend or are considered to go to arbitration or mediation. All of our contracts are up at the end of June. We plan on notifying the unions in short notice to commence negotiations. So there will be some involvement of labor council on some of those, but and that's like every third year cycle. So once we get past the cycle of negotiations, it tends to quiet down, and then it will bubble up when it comes back around again.
So I'm going to ask my question similar to yours. Are we set for the year, or do you think this is going to?
So we were able to take this for general counsel because his matters are not as active as labor counsel. So between the two, we try to manage that by moving money. It may require an additional transfer from the reserve account down the road, but right now, this should take us pretty far down the line.
Great.
Motion to approve?
Yeah, motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then Sharon's put a large packet here together for us, all coming from the salary reserve account.
I don't have a count, but can we take the whole packet since it's stapled as one? Make a motion that we take the whole packet as one, review them, talk about them, and then vote.
I think you can because they're all coming out of the reserve account.
Exactly.
Second.
We'll read them in as I read them, and you can just make sure I get them all, and we'll do it that way. So we have a motion and a second to take all the salary reserve transfer requests as one. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, here we go. From the town manager's salary, and again, are these all these are for the same reason, am I correct? These are all relative to 1% wage adjustment resulting from successful evaluation, so I'm not going to read the reason on each, we'll just swear there.
As I understand it, according to Karen, I remember I got thrown into this, I wasn't,
I'm reviewing
I went-
quickly,
I went
they all
through.
say 1%.
yeah.
Thank
I'll
you,
let you know if it doesn't. You can get started.
thank you.
Sure. Got a lot of
I
reading
appreciate
to do.
your help.
Got a lot of reading to do.
So town manager salary, amount requested $2,000. For town manager clerical, amount requested $7,334. For the town accountant, amount requested $1,251. For the assessor, amount requested $900. For the assessor assistant, that's not easy to say, amount requested $676. For the treasurer/collector salary, amount requested $927. For the assistant treasurer/collector, amount requested $676. For the assistant town manager/HR director, amount requested $965. For the IT manager, amount requested $511. For the assistant MIS director, amount requested $59. For the clerk's salary, amount requested $789. For the assistant town clerk salary, amount requested $614. For the police chief salary, amount requested $1,461. For the chief holiday, amount requested $74. For the deputy chief salary, amount requested $761. For the deputy chief holiday, amount requested $44. For deputy Quinn account, amount requested $190. For the chief's Quinn account, amount requested $365. This is fire department, for the chief's salary account, amount requested $4,381. For the deputy chief holiday account, amount requested $44. For the deputy chief's salary account, amount requested $761. For the deputy stipend, amount requested $190. From DPW engineering, the engineer's salary, amount requested $773. DPW highway, from the to the highway surveyor, amount requested $499. For the assistant DPW director, amount requested $59. DPW cemetery superintendent, amount requested $38. For the engineer GIS, amount requested $28. DPW recreation, the recreation director, amount requested $225. Solid waste, for the solid waste DDIS director, amount requested $29. From health, for the health sanitarian, amount requested $683. For the health inspector, amount requested $381. For the assistant health director, $456. From planning, for planning salary, amount requested $522. For animal control, the ACO salary, $406. Senior center, for the COA director, amount requested $831. For the program coordinator, $391 is amount requested. From library, the assistant to director technology, amount requested $546. And for library, the assistant to director for admin, $546. So Sharon did a quick total for us, and that amount from the salary reserve should come out to $31,386. Any questions on the request for transfers from the salary reserve account?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking those as a group.
Patrick's on top of that one.
Patrick, yeah, he's not going to let that one slide by.
This is where I take a bow, so listen, thank you.
No, thank you.
Steve is on deck, but thank you for your comments, much appreciated. Hope to see you maybe one more time. We'll see, if not,
Sounds good. Congratulations.
thank you.
Congrats.
Well deserved. Okay, next on the agenda is the presentation of the overtime comparison study by the Fire Rescue Department. Chief Coleman's here, the deputy chief as well. Thank you.
Okay.
You?
I think Mr. Kazanovich had a few more years in him, but. All right, good evening. So at the October 16th Finance Committee meeting, when some of the overtime transfers were being discussed, Mr. Marshall had made a suggestion, or he asked the question, he said, I'm curious as to what other municipalities are spending as far as a percentage of overtime regarding their salary line items. And, after hearing that, we thought, geez, that's a really good question. So let's take a look at that. So I want to thank Deputy Chief Johnson for really diving into this study. What he put together is we looked at, including Auburn, we looked at 30 municipalities that range anywhere from departments that run 6 a shift to departments that run 15 a shift or 23 a shift, ranging anywhere from 2,700 to 7,000 emergency calls. So when you're talking about overtime, there's 2 metrics that really matter when we're trying to figure out what that number is. And those metrics are how many calls is a municipality doing, and how many people are you trying to do it with, right? So regardless of what the tax rate is or the population or population density, there's hundreds of metrics in which we could compare ourselves to other communities. But when we're talking about this, as far as overtime and staffing, it really comes down to those 2, call volume and how many people are we trying to do it with. So page 1 gives you those 29. And we're not going to go, through the whole thing. There's a lot to digest here, but I'll just extend to anyone on the committee that if anybody has any questions, please feel free to email me, call me. I'll be more than happy to get into the weeds with it. But page 1 is just a general synopsis looking at the FY23 budgeted overtime versus actual spent, 24 budgeted versus actual. And then on the bottom, it just gives what those averages are and call volume and how many people are we trying to do, those calls with. Page 2, I think, is probably the most telling of the 3 pages. So we fall in Auburn between the 5,000 and 6,000 call volume range. We ran some projections last week. We are already ahead of where we were at this time last year. So once again, for the, at a minimum, we'll call it 13 years, we're going to set another call volume record. So the call volume continues to climb. But just for reference, the highlighted area, we're in that 5,000 to 6,000 call volume range. So when you look in those highlighted areas, the average budgets of those departments is a little over $7 million. The actual budgeted overtime is about 900,000, call it 901. The actual is a little over 1.1. And then their maximum shift staffing at 12, we'll call it 13, minimum of 10. That's where we're trying to get in terms of the staffing study. We're currently at 11. We're already in talks with town administration and Board of Selectmen about moving that needle hopefully soon to get us to the 12 range. So even the minimum and the maximum falls right sort of like where we are or where we're striving to be. So those numbers are not really shocking in terms of that departments with the 5,000-6,000 call volume range. And then below is the Auburn comparison and the difference in terms of those averages. And, you know, you'll see the difference between, you know, the budgeted overtime and, you know, the comparative average. There's quite a difference there. And then the last page, you know, you've heard me talk about this before, and I think it's always important just to kind of reiterate, whether we're talking about building maintenance or fleet maintenance or overtime, there are known expenses on July 1 before we even start out the fiscal year. So page 3 just gives a short breakdown in terms of what our known overtime expenses are on July 1. You know, we have approximately almost $63,000 in an overtime liability provide. And again, that number fluctuates because it depends on who works the holiday, who doesn't. So there is some fluctuation there. But this is based on if every employee showed up for all 11 holidays, this is the maximum exposure in terms of what we're looking at. Callback, we looked at FY 24 and 25 in terms of callback. And then for training of special teams and other things, there's known cost to those right on July 1 in terms of them following their training schedules. So our total identified overtime, you know, on July 1 is a little over $122,000. Well, out of a $300,000 overtime budget, that leaves us $177,000 remaining for the rest of the fiscal year for those unknowns that we just don't know. So the bottom right here, it just, again, it looks at the comparison in terms of what the average is. And this is just the communities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are just the 7 communities that fall in that 5,000 to 6,000 call volume range. So it shows the percentage of their salary line item in terms of what is dedicated to overtime. On the average, you can see it's 14.6, Auburn's 8.5. And then the actual spending jumps up to 17.8. Ours is above the average for 24, knowing that all of the issues that we had last year in terms of personnel and all those reasons. So again, not completely shocking that the actuals in FY24 were a little higher than the average, just understanding that it was an odd year. So when you look at this, you know, I think the message is, if you look at, you know, if you look at the overall average, actually, let me jump to I'm going to look at page 2. If we look at what the average budget for those departments is overtime is $900,000. I am not sitting here. I want to be clear what I'm not saying. Is I am not saying that we need an overtime budget of $900,000. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that, and town meeting back in November already took some steps and some action to try to address that. The town manager is already planning on trying to address that as well, additionally in the FY26 budget. So we do not need 900. We don't need 800. I don't even believe that unless some major circumstance we don't even need 700. You know, what our actual was in the previous fiscal year, it was 720. But again, those were because of all of those really out of whack scenarios. But I think what this shows is we need more than the 3 that were budgeted. And, but I also believe that everybody is taking steps in recognizing that and getting us there. So I thank Mr. Marshall for raising the question, because I'll be honest with you, I don't really know that I would have even thought to look at this if the question wasn't asked. But I think it is a good piece of information for the Finance Committee has, just so you do have the ability to kind of make that comparison and say, oh, okay, this is what else is happening across the Commonwealth. So I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions. I know it's a lot of numbers, but like I said, you all have my number, you know my phone's on. If there's any questions, don't ever hesitate to call. But again, I just want to thank the deputy for pulling this together in about a 30-day, a little less than 30-day window. Those herding fire chiefs is like herding cats on occasion to try to get this information. So there was a lot of back and forth and emails and phone calls just to try to pin them down for the data. And the deputy did a great job putting this together. So
That's why you call them deputy chiefs.
yes, yeah, exactly. You want something done, you call the deputies.
Do you share this backwards to them now that you've,
I did. So this went back to the 29 other communities. There are some other data sets. This is actually, this is a 10-page document. You have the last 3 of the document. There's some other stuff that we were asked by the CFO and HR to get in terms of data collection for contract negotiations. So the first 7 pages is a whole bunch of other data sets in terms of salary and, we're kind of doing that comparison. So we really, for the purpose of this, we wanted to make sure that we got this to you in a timely manner. But there's still another 7 pages that are looming that when this went back to them, they've slowly been sharing the data of the other 7 pages so we can make this very slowly, a complete document. But we wanted to at least make sure, because this was a topic and it was a question that was asked, by the vice chair, we wanted to make sure that we got this in your hands.
I just want to say thank you. This is great information. I feel like we've obviously had a lot of conversations about overtime, and understanding the context is the only way that we're going to know if we need to make a change. So
Yes,
this is helpful.
absolutely.
I just wanted to ask, your criteria for like towns, was it by the population in each community, or was it, because I noticed the calls go from 2,700 up in Charlton all the way to 7,000 in Tewksbury, but I'm wondering, is it because they all have on average 15 to 20,000 residents? Is it that they have a firehouse that's structured similar to yours? Was there a certain criteria for choosing these communities?
We looked at the communities first based on call volume. I do have all the populations for these communities as well. But, similar to Auburn, our daytime population and nighttime population are completely different. And that's one of the things that sets us apart from like a Charlton or somewhere else. So call volume's really the mechanism that dictates staffing in fire departments' models and how they operate and budgets and everything else.
So if I could just expand on that. The other thing that we wanted to do, Mr. Jones, was in order to kind of prove the theory, or to make sure that we were in context here, we wanted to look at those departments that respond to 2,000 to 3,000, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and we wanted to look at the data to make sure that they were all within a certain percentage. Like, okay, are the 5,000 to 6,000, is that, is that 14%? Is that way off the mark of all of the other towns that do less call volume but are in that thing? And what it showed was in each of those categories, all of the percentages were within the group. So it kind of brought some more validity
Sure.
to the study. So that's why we wanted to look at departments that sort of ranged from that 2,000 to 7,000, because we wanted to also kind of make sure that our numbers were validated.
And it also, I think one of the things I learned before I even went to college, when you give a report, you got to understand it. So the fact that you've explained now why the numbers go from call volume low to high, now the report becomes very clear.
I have a sort of a different question because you mentioned that the volume of people goes up and down according to the day. So sort of a 2-part question. Does our staffing sort of reflect that, and/or do the call volume reflect that?
So our normal population by the latest census puts it roughly around 17,000. But Massachusetts transportation models, in conjunction with like the business bureaus that look at this, put our daytime population at 32,000. So that's a significant jump, from daytime to nighttime. Our staffing does not change for that. The same number of people on a 24-hour shift at 10 in the morning, at 10 at night is the same. Again, right, there could be a couple of hour period of time where there are no calls, and then there could be 6 calls in a 6-minute period. So it all sort of flushes out. Last Friday, I don't know if any of you, I was on vacation, so I wasn't at the tree lighting, but I don't know if anybody was at the tree lighting, but last Friday, the shift did 32 responses in their 24-hour shift, right? So the deputy, again, I want to thank the deputy for all of his effort by himself, helping with the tree lighting, because all of our on-duty staff that were supposed to help in and pitch in, they were gone the entire time. So, and we're seeing more and more days like that. I mean, the days of 20 years ago, a busy day was, 10 runs. We're in that 25 to 30 category most days of the week. But Friday, again, was a good example. That was a 32-run day. So no, the staffing does not change based on that, because again, you don't know sort of when the calls are going to come in.
And we also have the highways, and you have 1.5 million vehicles going through town every day, and that
Right.
traffic's traffic in Auburn, we all know that.
My question more, just going back into the overtime issue of, if you don't have the staff, which hopefully you're not going to have that problem anymore, where you would not have coverage, you would have to sort of figure out, if you had to not have coverage, where would it be? But hopefully that's not an issue.
So on the same topic, I guess the question would be like, are we less likely to do callbacks at night, knowing that I'm assuming the call volume is lower when the population is lower?
So the call volume or the callbacks are really dictated by when the calls come in. I mean, there have been Sunday afternoons at noontime where we're 7 deep at noon, and I couldn't even tell you why. And then we're recalling at, 7. I would say that statistically, we are doing much less callbacks in the midnight hours unless it's an actual fire. But the majority of the callbacks are, daytime to sort of evening hours. I think if we were to plot it out, I think that's the trend that we would see. We do a lot less callback in the midnights. If we do a callback in the midnight or early morning, we did one the other day. We had a truck rollover on the Pike 4:30 in the morning. That's something that's going to keep the entire on-duty crew tied up for a period of time, so there'll be no one available to respond. So you may see a callback at 4:30 in the morning, something like that. But most of them are day to evening if we would have plotted out. But I saw you, Mark, kind of react when the deputy said that. Yeah, the transportation models, we have over 1 million vehicles a day traveling through the town of Auburn, and a little over 70,000 of that is commercial truck traffic alone in a 24-hour period. So our highways are very, very busy on a daily basis. The numbers are staggering when you kind of hear them out loud. You don't think about it that way, but staggering.
I think I'd add too that from experience, their life cycles influences. For example, when there's a snowstorm, emergency rooms and cardiology wards get packed because so many people get to that next snowstorm, turn a certain age, and they have a heart issue, whether it's a heart attack or something. And, you'll go into a cardiac unit in the middle of a snowstorm and you go, why are you so busy tonight? And they're like, it's snowing.
Everybody's shoveling.
Like, so life cycles themselves contribute to all this.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's not really a matter of whether it's daytime or nighttime, but something's going on and the population is responding to that, which increases or fluctuates the amount of calls.
That's a great point, Mr. Jones. And actually, again, 10 years ago, when we looked at call data and we looked at trends, which we do all the time, things have changed just in the last 5 years. COVID changed the game. We have more people working remotely at home now than we did pre-COVID. So we're seeing a lot more people home during the day, which is kind of raising that day. So you're right. It's not just, there's 17,000 people who live here. They all go somewhere and go to work. That's not the case anymore, even society-wide. So we're seeing more and more people staying at home, working remotely.
Well, I thank you as well for this. This was a great learning tool.
Yep. Anytime.
Add some clarity
Yep.
to your.
You said you had 32 calls the other day. So is that enough to trigger mutual aid?
Oh, we can't, the answer is we can't function on a daily basis for the most part without mutual aid. whether it's incoming units to Auburn, and other communities are in the same boat. Everybody's sort of, dealing with that back-to-back call volume. There is rarely a day that goes by where there is not a mutual aid response to the town of Auburn. So we have mutual aid on Friday. They had to have been-
Primarily ambulances coming in from other communities.
Yeah, the only time a mutual aid fire company would come in is if we had a working fire. So the bulk, 90-something% of the mutual aid is ambulances. But I think that a few days before I went on vacation, I think at one point within like a 10-minute period, we had 4 mutual aid ambulances in town handling calls within 10 minutes because our 2 trucks were tied up. So,
Chief, I just wanted to quickly, I think the most beneficial thing for me to see here is that you kind of start out with that, that 122,000 right out of the gate, out of the 300, and you really only put on here your holidays. Can you just sort of touch upon the membership has time that they need to take? They have an allotted number of, they earn time, and it's their time that they've earned, and they at some point need to take it. They can't carry it on forever, correct?
yeah, I'll let the deputy.
And there's a window of time. Nobody really wants to take a December 11th vacation, but there are peaks and valleys to that. Am I correct? And maybe you have contractual stuff. You can only take so many people can take the 4th of July weekend, things like that. Can you just touch upon that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll let the deputy, dive into the meat, but I'll just say that we were in a lot, I'll say worse shape when we were working on the true fiscal year. When we were working on a July 1 to June 30th, and you had the entire department trying to get a day off in April, May, and June before their time went, that was very problematic. In the last collective bargaining agreement, we made a switch to that where we went from a fiscal year to an employee's anniversary date. And that has sort of spread the wealth across the department because we typically only hire really in one of 3 months. We either bring people on in July, we bring people on in January, or we have a handful of people that we brought on in November. So when you look at sort of the start dates of the department, they're sort of grouped in those months. And now they have to use their time before their anniversary date. So that has allowed the deputy to kind of spread that out much more. But that is a good point that none of the PTO is on this list, so.
Right, yeah, their time off, they, like the chief said, it's based on their anniversary date. So there's no more fighting to try to get that day off at the end of the year. However, they are not allowed to carry their time off, so they have to plan accordingly for it. And we do allow 3 off per shift, which mathematically we have to in order to make it work. Where we come into some issues here and there is, the staffing is at 11, the minimum's 9, that means 2 off. But if 3's off that particular day, it's going to create a little bit of overtime. But mathematically, based on their time, you have no choice. You have to allow them off.
We really, even working at 9, it's a struggle, but right now our minimum is really 8. 9 is where we need to be. The problem is, like the deputy said, is mathematically, if we have a group of 11 and we only allow 2 off, if that were to work out over the course of a year, we still have had to deny people time off because mathematically we need to allow 3 people off a shift, not 2. So and that's another way where our overtime budget hasn't reflected that. So we're also trying to staff at a minimum of 9 with a budget that represents a minimum of 8. So that hasn't sort of kind of caught up as well, which is why ultimately if we can keep moving that needle, and this is a conversation that we've had with the Board of Selectmen, and the board they're sympathetic to the cause, they recognize it, and I do believe that they're working to get us in that direction. But ultimately, if we can get to 12, that will allow us to maintain a minimum of 9. And then if ultimately, if we could get to the ultimate goal of 13, which is what the staffing study recommended, then we could then increase our minimum from 9 to 10 to give us a little more breathing room, but it would still then give us that flexibility to allow the 3 people off in order to take care of the PTO needs. So best case scenario is if we could get to 13 with the minimum of 10, which is what was recommended, would be sort of right in the sweet spot.
Chief, can you just, I mean, over the years, you've thrown out the numbers, the 8s, the 9s, the 11s, the 10s, the 13s, but that's still, I think residents have a picture of when the alarm goes off, that every one of those bay doors is going to open at both ends of town, and every truck is going to roll out with, that's really, even with those numbers, that your goal numbers, that is still not the case.
Yeah, even if we were to move to a group of 13, we still do not meet what the recommended standards are by the National Fire Protection Association for staffing fire equipment. NFPA recommends 4. 4 is ultimately the safest, configuration, because you have to remember the person that is driving the truck is also operating the pump. The trucks don't pump themselves. So you lose a person right out of the gate to the truck, which then gives 3 firefighters that are mobile to sort of work a task. We are lucky if we are running 3 people on an engine. And I would say that we rarely run 3 people on an engine. We have 2 people on a fire engine. Best case scenario, when we're at a minimum of 8 and everybody's in the station and there's no ambulance calls or there's no other calls, best case scenario, 8 firefighters are going to show up to your emergency. Worst case scenario, if everybody's tied up, it's potentially going to be a supervisor alone, but when the engine shows up, it's going to be 2 people. We do not fully staff the fire engines in the community. I'd love to, but there are financial restraints to that. I get it. I would be thrilled if we could put 3 people on a fire engine. Our staff would be thrilled that if we could put 3 people on a fire engine. But 95% of the time in the course of a year, our fire engines are operating with a driver operator and a supervisor and an officer. There is no third firefighter sitting behind them on that truck.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday if I don't see you.
Look forward to see you.
You as well.
Bye, Sharon.
This is, we rely on.
This is where Sharon's up.
This is Sharon's.
Sharon's job.
So the next item is the Finance Committee reorganization.
Call for nominations for Chair of the Finance Committee. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Kevin Kennedy to be the chair of the finance committee.
I second.
I want to offer discussion. You had it 1 year, you're just learning, so you got to roll with it. You did, now you got to implement what you've learned. So I'm in favor of that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Seeing none, by roll call vote, Mr. Consilvio
Aye.
for Mr.
Kevin.
Kennedy.
Yeah.
Mr. Graham,
Yes, Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Jones,
Yes, for Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes, for Mr. Kennedy.
and Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. Yes, I will gladly accept. Thank you. I appreciate your support.
Need a vice chair.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we renominate Mr. Marshall as well. He's had 1 year as vice chair, and I think he's warmed up and ready to go.
I'll second.
We'll call this one as well, or is?
No, that's your job, no.
I know. Do I have to? Okay, okay, so we have a nomination, a motion, and a second by roll call. Mr. Consilvio?
I agree with that. That's Michael.
Yes, for Mr. Marshall.
Yes.
And I certainly agree, and then
I accept.
you accept? Very good. Well, thank you. I think we've been reorganized. Thank you to everybody. We got a good group. We are short one officially. Ed Coleman had to resign because he moved out of town after how many years on finance?
14.
14 years, which is no small feat, and he had done plan,
CBA for.
zoning board, so certainly,
As well as town meeting member.
yeah, so very involved in the community, was certainly, sorry to see him go. He was sort of a level,
It was really a pleasure to sit on the board with. He was great to work with.
yeah, exactly. And my understanding is the Board of Selectmen did,
Issued a letter of.
they issued a letter of appreciation to him for his years of service, so I thought that was a very nice gesture on there.
Yeah, nice.
Very good. We have a few transfers that were conducted that were under the $250 mark. We've been presented with those. If there's, I don't think we have to take any actions on them, but we have them. If you had any questions, we could certainly discuss them, but I think we were all there. The next item on the agenda is the discussion and potential vote to discontinue remote hybrid meeting participation. I know, Mr. Jones, you had recommended putting this on the agenda. Would you like to discuss?
Sure, I think it's straightforward for me. I think the primary reasons why I've done this is because the world's operated for many, many decades and centuries with people in-person meetings. And I know that the primary reason why so many boards went hybrid was because there was a pandemic, and that pandemic has reached quite a length of time. And boards are receding. They're not receding, but they're taking back the virtual stuff, and I think I'm in agreement. It's a very complex board. We have a lot of matters that we have to address, and a lot of important matters, and I think this has seen its better time. I think that we're at a point where I believe it's really more important that we be in person and do our business than, again, going back to what I'm repeating myself now, and when it was needed, it was there, but it made our meetings much more complex, much more complicated, and I don't think it really altered. I mean, if we're up on a hybrid meeting now and there's no one there, there's no one here, and so that just sends my point home, that we would be having to conduct business, and if we had to go through the agenda we did this evening, we'd be another 45 minutes into it. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of asking us to go back to the way we've been working after we've made I can't think of the word, it escapes me, but we made a concession to be a hybrid committee for a period of time. I think it's time we go back to a standing in-person committee.
You're not referring to public access, you're referring only to seated members participating.
No, it means that people, if they want to speak and the public wanted to come, they would have to come in. It is televised, but they can't participate. So you can go home after this meeting and watch it, but you can't participate in it remotely. You have to be present. Then they tape it, and then somebody can go, like we watch the selectmen's meetings now, or we watch zoning board of appeals or other towns and communities. They have their meetings, people show up and they go do its public comment and so forth, and then they finish the meeting and people watch it later. So I'm asking that we restore that and we go back to what is considered an in-person meeting to conduct business.
I'm actually leaning the other way. I think transparency and access favors using the technology that didn't exist 300 years ago. I understand your point. It's better for people to talk here and have an exchange. And, you can sort of read body language and all the other things, but we have no idea what the future's going to be, but we shouldn't be blocking it out.
Well, then I would retort or respond to that by saying that if in the future we find that there's a need or someone should step in and make a valid argument, I'm sure the board would be very open-minded to reinstitute it. It's not like we're taking it away forever. But we have been, just tonight alone, if we had taken these individual transfers as roll call vote, we would still be we would be halfway through the process.
Right.
And we're going into budget season, and there's going to be a lot to discuss. So again, I'm very open if down the road we need to restore it. I'm certainly sure we've done it once, we can do it again if there's a need. But I'm not seeing the need presently and haven't for some time. That's my view on.
When I started on the board, as I recall, we had a couple of meetings where we had a remote participant. I forget who, it might have been Trevor. So to me, that's just, I don't know what the circumstances were, but I can certainly imagine circumstances where people want to participate, but they're too sick to come in or whatever. And, that is not something that you could create a vote for that evening. Like it would be better just to have it in the background. And, I mean, I certainly understand the part about the roll call votes, which I think is a little bit inane. So that has to be, so somebody who's listening to it knows who said what, even though if they're not participating, I'm not sure how critical that ruling to me makes no sense. But that's really not the issue. The bigger issue is the principle, which is whether, since we have the technology, if people shouldn't be able to participate remotely for whatever reason, at whatever whim, whatever circumstances, and whether it's and certainly for a member of the public, but it certainly is for board members. And obviously, we don't get a lot of
No
live action
disrespect,
here.
but Mr. Trevor said he'd be at the meeting tonight, but he isn't, and he's not online either.
Right.
So just to make, that other observation. But I'm not the only one. I mean, I think it's time we at least discuss it, if not move with it. So that's my 2 cents. If other people want to.
So if I may, I'm on the fence, honestly. I agree with Steve in the sense that like it does give us more options. With budget season coming up, we have a lot of meetings. I know people have lives. Trevor has indicated, or members have indicated in the past that budget season is also a busy season at work. So having the ability to get a quorum, even if people can't necessarily be here, is helpful. I also know that we've had not as many as I would expect, but we've had department heads call in previously if they're, I know Chief Coleman has literally called in from the fire station a few times. So it does give people the opportunity to speak that they might not otherwise have. It gives the committee the opportunity to get to a quorum sometimes when we wouldn't otherwise be able to. At the same time, like it does increase the length of meetings, especially if we have a member present via remote who has to, like, we have to do the roll call votes. I genuinely don't know how I feel about it. Like, just to play devil's advocate, like, we're probably going to have 10 meetings in the next 4 months. And as a parent of a young child who is often sick at this time of year, the option to be able to call in is helpful. I know Trevor has young kids too. George has a few children as well. I mean, you've got kids in school and they're probably getting sick too. So, yeah, I genuinely don't know how I feel about this issue. I think, I agree that like transparency, the ability for anyone to just call in and make a comment if they really just wanted to is a good thing. It has not been taken advantage of very often, and we meet so shortly after business hours that I think most department heads just end up staying here instead of going home and calling in. But I know we've had department heads, they often don't end up speaking, but I know we've had department heads call in and be available to answer questions, and then we vote on a transfer without asking. But it's nice to know that I've seen the names up there. Yeah, it's a tough thing. I always lean on the side of transparency and progress when it comes to technology and things, but I also recognize that.
Sure, and
it's
we're
a-
being
it's a-
transparent because we're taped.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we're hiding anything.
No.
And our public, our meeting agendas get posted. People know what it is that, we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
And,
I think I personally view it, the option to go hybrid more as an advantage to the committee in the sense that, like, if you're sick and we need you to be here, you can join remotely. If we can't get right now we are down a member and hopefully we'll have a new member soon, but
Well,
if
that's on
one,
my list.
yeah,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
one or two of us is sick and we're not able to get here, we just can't have finance committee meetings. And especially during budget season when, a lot of these meetings end up being stacked up right against each other. Yeah, especially given that during budget season, we typically vote less because most of our time is spent on 2 or 3 budgets as opposed to a stack of transfers. But yeah, I agree with you in the sense that, like,
It would be
I
preferable.
wish more people would come. I do. I wish we could have all of these discussions in person. But I also recognize that, like, as Chief Coleman said, more people are working from home, more people are taking advantage of this technology every day. And I suspect we are trending more towards more things being online than less over the next 5 or 10 years. I think everyone in state government, I think the idea was that even the law allowing for hybrid meetings was only a short-term thing, and they just keep pushing out the deadline and extending it. And I believe they've now made it a permanent option, right? I don't know if it's still got an end date or not, but
I'm not sure if it has a mandate.
No, actually, there is no more mandate left. That's one of the reasons why I brought it up, that it's every committee's decision if they want to continue with it or not.
yeah. I just mean, I
again-
don't even think it was a possibility.
No, it is a possibility. As a board, we can stop it. But I know it works very well either way.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a lot of extra work for a board that's already, I mean, there are other issues I have or I take with the communication within the municipality. And just to throw it out there, I get, nothing infuriates me more than when I get something the night that I need to do it and I don't get an opportunity to really get, a grip on it. So, that's another conversation for another day. But then to have to add remote to it and all the other levels, I just think sometimes these meetings, and I will say this in all fairness, I don't get paid to sit on this board. I volunteer to do this. I volunteer to do a lot of things. My time is important to me. So if I can conduct business in a board meeting for all of 45 minutes instead of an hour and a half, I'm going to be a little selfish about the extra hour and a half, which you can be with your families and children by getting home to them at a proper time. But just keep in mind that if you want to be accessible to the outside, that you're sacrificing your own personal self for that and other people's time, because, we have individuals that have to tape us. They have to make sure that all of that stuff works. And when it doesn't work, then we have to live with it. There were a couple of times where remote went down and we couldn't offer or provide that service. And so, nobody got hurt because of that, so it's not like it's a failed system.
It's actually, the opposite is equally true, which is that a lot of conversations are much more candid and relaxed where there is no camera at all. And I've been in both.
Yeah, it's
So-
televised whether or not the question
Right.
is do we want people that, it's remote participation.
Participating, yeah.
That's what I'm challenging, is the remote participation part. In other words, if you want to participate, be in person. That's all I'm asking. Come up and be in person. And I've said it before, I've sat on many a boards over many a decades in this town, and I've been present and in person. It was, when I stepped up on this finance committee 25 years ago, 30 years ago, one of the questions, Bob and Sharon will attest to this, one of the questions that was asked to me at the time was, are you willing to give up your personal time? Because, and I just find that being at home is still giving up your personal time. But the remote participation does take a lot more time to operate a meeting.
I just wonder, so as I looked at the script that I rattled through, and,
Right.
sometimes you rattle through things, you don't really read the words. And so I wonder if the spirit of this and the acts that allowed it to occur, it says that all members of public bodies, and I think that only really entails the body being the committee. I don't think that means folks that may watch from home.
Right.
I don't think we've ever, there's somebody else online, I'm not sure who that may be, who's monitoring online here. But, we've never had a public, anything would have to be on the agenda correctly if there was a public comments component. People would not be able to raise their hands, and I've never had, in my experience, someone that's on remotely that is not a department head that we call upon, or someone to ask a question remotely. I believe that would have to be
Well, people that are at the select boards, if there's public hearings and they're butters, they can participate.
right, but that's on the agenda, hearings or
Yes,
public.
yeah.
So that's usually an agenda item. So I don't think, in my time, we've ever had anybody other than a department head appearing remotely. And I wouldn't have a problem with people giving testimony that were on the agenda. I don't think we're required to do the script at that point. I think that's just an option. So, but I do agree with Patrick that I think all the members need to be here. And I think it just goes, the meeting flows better, we can look each other in the eye, we can kind of get a spirit for the feeling of the room. I do think the members of the body, I would love to see everybody here in person. We can get through the things, we can, you know, but I do agree with Steve that, you know, it does allow, and I think this is the future of, you know, I don't think we're gonna have a lot of members of the public, you know, coming up and sitting in the room, but they may monitor from here. And I mean, the Auburn Cable does a great job, and through multiple, you know, if it's not on the cable channel, they're putting it on, you know, YouTube, their YouTube channel. There's a bunch of ways in which they can monitor these meetings, which is tremendous. But if this allows for another way, it's not the worst. But I just wonder if we can make a motion that the members of the body will no longer be allowed to participate remotely. And other committees, I'm told, have already gone a direction of moving away from remote. I don't know if it's a total, you know, if they're shutting the laptops down and not going there at all. Rich may have some guidance for us as to who's out there. I appreciate.
As a citizen, I think, I remember, I've been doing this for 33 years. And everybody came. If you couldn't get here, then you didn't belong to the committee. There's always excuses. But I think having people all aboard present, then people can come and interact. You get the better feeling, the vibes of the individual, how they work, how they interact with one another, they interplay with the words and stuff like that. You get the feeling of how it works, how the committee works. And I think it's very important. 2 or 3 of the committees have already gone, school committee, planning board, and I believe there's another one, I can't remember now, have gone in person. If they care enough about this topic, whatever it may be, they'll get here. And if you have some problem at home, I'm 86 years old. I come here every night to do this, or almost every night to do this. I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and you people stay home and sit in your thing and remote control and sit there drinking or whatever. Yes, I vote for this, yes, I vote for that. But I'm here. If I can get here, you all can get here. And sometimes because you're remote, sometimes we have to have someone else sitting over here in case some crazy person comes on the television and hacks in.
Everybody's not remote.
As it happened before many times, the school committee, selectmen, and maybe those. So I do believe, give it a try to have everybody in person. Doesn't mean we can't go back.
So if I can ask, if we're doing a split meeting, and I don't mean split meeting, but I'm trying to take Steve's lead by saying that if we have a citizen or say the director of the highway department is involved in the middle of a transfer, even though they're not a member, it's not really a hybrid meeting if they decide to dial in to go over a transfer. It's more a hybrid meeting if they, is it handled the same way as public comment?
Well, see, it's a hybrid meeting now because it goes online. People, that's why John was here for a while with a computer, just in case somebody did try to break in and he had to stop them.
I see.
And I don't know how to do that. I'm only
Right.
grunt for 33 years. That's just my personal opinion.
Yep.
And I know people like to relax a lot. So would I. But for $50 after taxes, $35, I come. And
Right.
I enjoy it. I started the first 2 or 3 years doing this. We did it for nothing because we enjoyed it so much.
So I don't think there will be anything preventing us.
I can't see why. I'm sorry.
That's all right, good.
I don't mean to interrupt.
That's all right, Rich.
And I'm speaking only as a citizen, not as an employee. I just think it would be nice to try it again. Back in 2020, you did, and before that, you did. So it would be interesting to see how it would work. Give it a trial period, and if you don't like it, you can go back.
There was a time where nothing was recorded and everything was shrouded in darkness. And I think, again, we should be trying to get as far away from the darkness and getting everything as transparent and clear and people to participate as you can get. Like, you have to be welcoming. People don't show up, fine. which is 90.99% of the time. They're only going to show up if we do something wrong. So, you know, take the empty audience is not necessarily a bad thing. It's really a bad thing when people are showing up with pitchforks. But they still need to be heard. And we need to find out whatever that problem is, so we don't have,
I think what I'm saying is,
Too much of the stuff
in order
we
for
see
them to have
going
been
on.
heard, if someone wanted to be heard tonight on one of the transfers, they would have had to have been on the agenda. We wouldn't just open up the mic on. So if they're not on the agenda for speaking, or there's not a component of the agenda for an open comment, then there really is no need, because we're not going to allow someone to stand up in the audience, other than getting the expert advice of Rich, who's done this for a lot of years. You know, they're not there. And I think we could make those exceptions. So if the DPW director was like, I'm at a conference in Arizona, but I want to speak because my budget happens to come out, we could make that exception and log in and allow them to remote into the meeting. That is not, I don't think that is a hybrid meeting. I think a hybrid meeting is, again, we may need some
With one of
guidance
us
from council to
participating.
say, is the public body really just us? Is that limiting us to being here only and not promoting in? But if someone wanted to give, speak to the board because they were on the agenda and they needed a remote option, I think the technology would allow for it.
when I was on the housing board, we would open with public comments and close with public comments, which, to be honest with you, I think that actually should be written into the law. We shouldn't have a meeting where we're just talking amongst ourselves with staff. We should allow, you know, the bigger issue is if somebody shows up, they're actually not on the agenda to ask a
Actually, a
question.
steering board, so if they had a public comment on the budget, they would go to the selectmen. You have to understand the nature of the committee that you're sitting on. So they couldn't come to us to affect comment. They would have to go to the selectmen, I believe, to affect comment on the budget. And they have an open, you know, they
Have it open, yeah.
So I think when the boards are set up, Steve, there is a, for the lack of a better rule, Robert's rules or something. When a board is established, I think the parameters in which its agenda needs to operate are set with that board. And so I think when the selectmen have open comment, because it's a part of the way that they're structured to run their meetings, we as a finance committee don't have public comment because we're sort of a subcommittee
I
of
think
the
it
selectmen.
might be in that term, that a committee versus a board. There may be
Right,
something in
committee
that
versus.
terminology. I'm not
right.
sure. I could-
And so maybe we just together hit that, maybe because we're a committee. Otherwise, if we were going to have open public comment, it would, and
Because
some-
you know what I'm going to say to that, right?
well, no, I was going to say they could also contact Sharon, or they could contact our chair and say they wanted to come in to talk to us, and we would certainly never say no.
Right.
But I just don't think it's a part of the formal structure.
Yeah.
I just think people, in the ideal world, we would all have so much time that we could all participate in everything that's going on. And we would be, you know, everybody would have a equal input. But where a republic, everything is sort of, you know, a derivative of a derivative of a derivative. To me, this is just putting an obstacle on our own participation more than, you know, if there are technical issues of people hacking in and you know, throwing stink bombs or whatever, you know, but even that is still something you can isolate technologically. I think, you know, the day when I missed one meeting so far because I was too sick, I was too sick to watch the meeting. So I don't think I was thinking, much less thinking of calling in. But in retrospect, you know, if it had crossed my mind, it would actually been a good thing to do, because I really regretted missing that meeting. So,
George, do you have something?
I was just going to say, in summary, I mean, I'm okay with getting rid of the, you know, online participation part. I think transparency, like we said, it's already being recorded. People can go back and look at it. There's no change in real transparency. And like we're talking about participation, again, now knowing they would need to be on the agenda, we're not really cutting that out either. It's mostly just for us, which, like we said, before COVID, you know, everyone, that's how we did it. Everyone got by. With COVID, you know, and even since, you know, we've made it work. if you're too sick, usually you know in time to tell everyone. So if 3 of us were sick, we would hopefully tell Sharon and everyone beforehand so we'd know and we could reschedule. You know, I had that happen with the zoning meeting once so far, the zoning bylaw review committee I'm on. It was, you know, just 3 of us showed up. I don't think they were sick, they just didn't show up. Luckily, that hasn't happened here. I think we're a little more responsible and, yeah, to the point of people trying to cut into the meetings too. My wife was on school council for PacJog, and she is again this year. And yeah, they had somebody cut in with some very inappropriate stuff right away, and obviously it disrupted the whole meeting. Everyone got flustered, so that's always, you know, a possibility. And again, like Patrick said, the roll call tonight, you know, a lot of nights, that would delay us all quite a bit, which I don't think any of us prefer, so that's just my take on it. Didn't want to cut anybody off earlier, so I was waiting for my chance.
I'm definitely not a fan of the roll call. Just to be perfectly clear,
Just being
if this is the only way to get rid of the roll call, then you could probably convince me. But I think we could, you know,
I want to acknowledge too that we all make a lot of sacrifices. I myself, everybody, and I sit on multiple boards. We sacrifice, and I'm just trying to be fair to everyone at the board. I just thought that it was a good time to bring it up. One of the things I will mention too is that we're going to be seeing a little bit of a transition. We've got a new Board of Selectmen. Tom, you know, as we recognize tonight, a longstanding, you know, person who has been a threat in this community for decades and has been a strong pillar because he knows everything. And a lot of people I know turn to him as moving on. So I think it actually merits that we work more closely as a board and limit our distractions and limit our challenges. And I would say that one of the challenges is to run a meeting with remote participation.
I would say distractions too. If you're at home, you know, especially with me with my kids, I know they're always wanting to tug on you, ask you something, this and that. So it is a distraction too. And if you're sick, you know, like Steve said, didn't want to even think that much. So maybe it's, you know, it might not be the best idea, even if you did try and come in and you're sick and you didn't get much sleep.
And then to your point, if we could, I don't know that we could, what's the word, toggle it, you know, so like we can say that we want to do, but the minute that we know, like we plan our meetings out. So if we were to plan, and one of the things that we did in the past that we don't do, and it's not so much us as a board, but one of the things that the Finance Committee did was we actually planned, like I think somewhere in February, we say, okay, it's the next 6 Wednesdays, and we go all through March. And so we know what, you know, even though we know we're meeting 10 weeks, and if somebody knows ahead of time, they're already saying, I can't make that meeting, I'm traveling for business, or I can't do this. Or if someone knows after the meeting's been planned, Sharon, is it a fact that if it's posted as a not remote meeting that it can't be changed? If we found the need because someone called you up the day before the meeting and said to change it, so we can't toggle it. We can't toggle it.
Like now, you wouldn't just say it's, well, we have had in-person meetings if things aren't accessible, like at the town meeting, but that's.
Yeah, I
because
mean,
of
we
the
could hold
setup.
this off, and I could ask, you know, the town manager and town council, is there a way to, case by case, you know, if a week in advance, someone has a hardship that wants to participate, or a department head who would, you know, again, has some sort of family matter or professional matter that doesn't allow them to be here, can they, can we put them on the agenda as a participant? Or does this act really only apply, again, to the members of the board or committee and not those that may want to, I don't know, so.
And in all fairness, because there are at least 3 or 4 of you that have children on this board, but prior to 2020, we've had many members sit on this board that had families. And
to give you a different perspective, you know, because I went to those finance training conferences, and I was talking to somebody from a different town who'd been there for 25 years. If you had missed 2 meetings, you would get kicked off the board 20 years ago, because it was such a privilege to sit on the board, whereas now it's hard to fill boards. So the culture is not what it used to be.
Well, I brought it up. You know, I don't know that I'd like to leave it as an open discussion for the moment. I don't even want to vote. I think we're just going to have to take this under advisement as a board. I think we'd be too quick to vote on it tonight because we have a very strong cross-section of opinions, and I don't think, I'm in favor of a 3-2 vote or whatever. I'd like people to be more comfortable with it.
Is there any information, if I'm going to send an email to the town manager or town council to ask for some guidance that you would want? Whether, does it have to be all or none? Can it be somewhere in the middle? Can it be, you know,
Right.
scheduled appearances? Is it only apply to us and not?
Right, I think we need some clarity on remote participation as it relates to the members of the board or the committee, and it relates to the people participating on the agenda.
Okay.
That would be the
I'll
question.
send a request, and then I'll ask Sharon to push it out with the responses so that we can discuss that at our next meeting.
Because and to your point, like Steve's saying, yeah, it was like that up until 2020, but, you know, we found a way to work around that, and people need to be parents. And it's a challenge today to do a lot of what parents have to do, so I don't want to take that privilege away because, you know, they are standing board members who have a lot of responsibility. So I think it's still in, I'm glad we got the opportunity to talk about it. We haven't even chatted about it for the last 3 years.
I mean, ideally, we should all come in, right? I mean, that's really the bottom line, is the board should certainly make the commitment as best they can. But again, I would feel very uncomfortable saying you have to be here when you're sick.
When you know the technology exists.
Yeah,
I
well-
think that's really our dilemma is, you know, do we have to be so firm one way or the other? Sure.
Okay.
You know, what about, you know, the maximum that could be remote that are committee members is 2 or something? You know, so you don't have, you know, one guy sitting here by himself
Yeah, but
and
that would.
and the whole
you-
thing.
You know, you'd have to do, one person in remote participation is a roll call vote. It doesn't matter if Kevin could be sitting here by himself, and Mike could be on the screen as his vice chair, and all 4 of us, or 5 of us, and it wouldn't matter. Once one person shows up remote participation, you can't tell the other 4 people they can't. Then there's a distortion of privilege.
What about just conducting the roll call vote differently?
I don't know.
No, like if it's unanimous, like why does it have to be recorded as, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, well, I guess because they got, I guess.
No, now you're messing with the
Yeah.
law. The law
Yeah.
came down.
I could see the problem already. Who said yes, who said no?
Right.
I'll say, like, at the end of the discussion, I feel more comfortable going non-remote than I did before, with the understanding that, like, you're right, we've never had a member of the public come to talk. And if they couldn't, even if they wanted to, because they're not on the agenda, then, like, the value is only to us and to the department heads when it comes to, like, who's allowed to participate remotely. So the department heads, there have been maybe 5 times in the 4 years that I've been on the board that someone showed up remotely. It's not a common thing.
And a lot of them showed up remotely because they weren't feeling good, and today they have an option to sit in a corner where no one's around them and wear a mask,
Yeah.
you know? Just saying.
But we
Send
made
someone
it
to stand in
5:30
for 'em,
this
too.
time, so it's much easier for them too.
Yeah.
But
But I do think it's worth asking the question of whether or
Ask the
not,
question.
whether or not
Sure.
at least town employees could call in remotely. And if we could leave that option available to them, then we can let Sharon call in from home every time.
Our agenda does, one of the things our agenda doesn't seem to have, I think we should add it, because you asked, but it's not here, is there any other new business or is there anything more? Because before we adjourn, I know Sharon, I'm not using the right word, but one of the things I want to discuss, and I'm jumping in, because I don't want to lose the opportunity, is do you think we can, since now learning that Michael quietly rode off into the sunset, and I'm really,
Michael or
Ed?
Ed rather, I apologize, Ed, rode off into the sunset, and I'm really sad to hear that. We should post that position sooner than later, or,
it has, and it is posted on the website, and we.
but who makes the decision as to when, like, are we going to sit here
for,
Select board appoints.
well, no, I understand that, but is the select board going to act on that? Is there anything on their agenda? Or do they decide when they're going to help us, or?
Well, they decide when to set up the person to come in for an interview. You know, usually there's a deadline for the applications to come in.
And we don't have that information at the moment? Okay. So if I could just know when the deadline for the applications are, just because I don't want it to go to the spring?
Okay.
In the past, haven't we gotten an email just letting us know if there was going to be an interview in case someone wanted to attend?
We can ask, make sure
But-
Danielle,
We can't go through discussion that something's not on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
The agenda has to be very specific
Right.
now.
Right, so I'm just, yeah, I'm not going into detail, but I think it's important to recognize that we're just heading into our budget season, so it's a really good opportunity to fill the position and give someone some exposure and not have to wait till the spring. That's really why I'm forcing the discussion. And it's being taped, so even though it's not on the agenda, I need to get that off my chest.
Can I ask a different question? You know, when the town does the code red calls,
Say it again?
you know, when the town does the code red calls, and the, you know, the school's closed or open or whatever. How expensive are those? Because one of the things, one of the problems, odd problems of the modern age is we have so much information and we're not communicating. And it seems to me that like using the town system to send out a blast that says, we need somebody for the finance committee. Would you be interested? You know, go to this webpage or,
It's,
you know.
so I will say, it is posted on the town's website and the library both have links saying like, if you're interested in any board vacancies, you can both see which ones are vacant and apply even just generally that like, that's how I found this board was I just applied to a general, hey, I'm interested in getting involved with the town. I'm willing to do any board.
We could be, the town is and I think this is a generic communication problem towns have, is you need to communicate to the townspeople.
The problem is that you have, like,
And
we
if
can
it
talk about
costs-
this after the meeting,
If
but
this costs $700.
I doubt very
or it
much
costs $50,
not a, I don't think it's
obviously.
a cost issue. I think it's a, whether or not you are legally allowed to send messages of that type.
Yeah, and every time there's an opening, people don't want to get that many emails or that many texts, so yeah.
we can discuss, we'll get that, we'll get that on the next agenda and talk with the town.
So to Sharon's point, I know,
We're already
I
gonna
know
have a
that we're not
complaint from-
supposed to talk about stuff on the agenda, but I think it ties our hands because then the meeting ends and we have to bring it up off record that we have something we want to talk about. So there's got to be something, even if it's a one sentence concise, can we find out? I don't know, but I'm just
And I
trying
will, and I
to.
will bring us on course to say that any discussion relative to the vacancy is part of our reorganization, which is on the agenda. So
Okay.
I think we're covered as far as that one goes, but we're not going to belabor it. We'll
Yep.
Talk to the
Yeah.
town manager at our next one as to how things are advertised to ensure that the wide variety of the public, so as we bring our group together, we have
You can find two lawyers and you will get two different interpretations of open meeting law requirements. Because
okay. Let's move on to, we've had a good discussion on that. We had our minutes. If anybody has any questions on the minutes?
We just accept it as is, right?
Accept it as is, if there's no further discussion. Next meeting, Sharon, just to get us,
I'm
when,
not sure. I'll have to check in with Karen if there's any more.
Is she due back soon or is it going to be after? Okay.
Otherwise,
Hello?
the budget will Start and then.
Oh.
hello?
Yes, hello. Yeah, I'm here on Zoom. Did I miss the part about the road on Merrill Road and Hotel Road and Minot Avenue? Did I miss that part?
I think you might be on the wrong meeting. This is the Auburn Finance Committee, and that item is not on our agenda.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I didn't know there was any more than one meeting. There was more than one meeting.
Yeah, I don't know how to get you over to that other one either.
Are they still meeting?
Still meeting at Conservation. They started at 7, yes.
I would recommend going to the town website, finding the agenda for the meeting that you're interested in and entering that link. And Sharon's indicating that she thinks it's the Conservation Committee.
Okay, fine.
Okay, good luck. So we don't know, we think we'll wait to hear if there's any other transfers, but other than
Well,
that,
yeah, because the budget now will come in
Sure.
January,
Usually have at least one in January, right?
sometimes,
Okay.
sometimes. Depends what's going on here.
so we probably won't have anything before the holidays, so I just want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Best to you, you and your families, and stay happy and safe and healthy, and yeah, no, I think that's it. Nothing further. We will adjourn. Do we have a
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Aye, aye.